Thank you for joining us. It is a real pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to talk about music. It is a pleasure to talk about Broadway. My name is Simon Kafka. I'm a guitarist. I live in New York City. I'm going to be joined by 5 amazing musicians, friends, and colleagues of mine. We are going to talk to you guys about, Broadway, about being professional musicians, about, we're going to answer your questions. We're going to try to enlighten you guys as much as we can about, what it's like to have this job, to play musicals, to be on Broadway. What was it like getting started? A whole host of things. So I'm going to start by introducing everybody that's joining me. We have an amazing guitarist, John Kengla is here, violinist, Antoine Silverman, Philip Bayton, great violinist, Emily Browza, cellist, wonderful. In a moment, we'll be joined by another colleague of mine who's a conductor and pianist. And everybody here is working on shows, has worked on a bunch of different shows on Broadway, as well as gigs all over the world, all over New York. John has performed in Russia many times and all over Russia. So I'm going to start by just going around. I'm going to call on you guys, and we can talk a little bit about, tell us where you're from, what instrument you play, what show you're on, and we'll just do a little bit of introduction. So Antoine Silverman, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Simon, and welcome to everybody. So my name is Antoine Silverman. I'm a violinist. I was born and raised in the New York area, just outside the city. Currently, I'm playing on a show called The Great Gatsby. My first experience with Broadway was shortly after college. I went to college in New York City, and a former teacher of mine, actually my teacher when I was 8 and 9 years old, who I'd lost touch with, but then somehow got back in touch with sort of towards the end of my college years, was a Broadway and freelance violinist. And at the time, he was playing on Beauty and the Beast, which had pretty much just started at that point. So he very nicely, after a little bit of a period of time where maybe they brought in more veteran players to make sure that they had people who knew what they were doing, because I was 22 at the time, he brought me in. And it was an interesting experience, actually. In many respects, I wasn't ready for, not technically speaking, but just mentally, to be playing Broadway. I was just in that college head. I was playing in a lot of bands. I play a lot of folk and fiddle music. I had already in my mind been thinking about maybe moving to Nashville to try to make some inroads in country music and bluegrass. And I got dropped into a pretty hardcore New York freelance scene. Beauty and the Beast was a very old school show, lots of old school players, not necessarily that welcoming to young people who didn't maybe know what they were getting themselves into from an interpersonal space. So I actually did not enjoy it at all. I played a sub throughout that summer, 1994, and did not really make any good contacts, good connections. Also, I subsequently found out that my former teacher was a little bit of a polarizing figure. And so I think the fact that he brought me in was already a mark against me. So these are the things that as you sort of go on your journey, you understand it's like a little bit more multi-layered. Relationships build upon other relationships. So I was a little bit behind the 8 ball, but actually it was very formative, because that summer of 1994, subbing there during that period of time, was the clinching factor that made me decide to leave New York City to move to Nashville. I had been on the fence. I can't do this. This is ridiculous. I'm an artist. I did end up moving to Nashville, and for about 3.5 years. Then I moved back to New York for some personal and musical reasons. And then I started reintegrating into the Broadway scene, and I had a completely different experience. The first show that I subbed in when I got back in 1998 was called Footloose, which was like a lot of fun with lots of good players, much more friendly, just dynamic. I felt much more welcomed. And then slowly but surely, I was off and running. So that's the beginning of my experience. And maybe should we throw it to somebody else? We can get into more.
I have a lot of follow-up questions for you, but
okay.
before we get into that, I would like to elaborate on something for our audience, which is, so essentially, Broadway musicians, the way it works is there are people that have, like, we call it the chair, right? The job, like I am the bass player at, The Lion King, or I am the drummer at Hamilton. However, our contracts, more or less, allow us to not, there are 8 shows a week, and our contracts allow us to not be at every single show, playing every single show. Meaning that we all have a list of people, like usually between 3 and 6, I would say on average, that sub for us. So, if you are on vacation, or if you're feeling sick, or, for whatever reason you can't be at a show, you have something else to do. You have this list of people, and we'll get into what that is all about. You have a list of people that you call that come in and take your place. So when Antoine is talking about subbing on Beauty and the Beast, that's what he's referring to. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So could you talk about a little bit more, like, you mentioned this Disney show, Beauty and the Beast, being very kind of like old school. Yeah. So can you give us like some context and like talk about kind of what that meant to you at the time?
Of course. And actually, just to pick up on one thing you just said there, that this idea of a regular shareholder and substitutes is sort of the the lifeblood of the New York freelance scene, because with some exceptions, like maybe people at the Lion King, the show's been going for 25 years and shows no sign of slowing down, we all sort of rotate through shows because they all open and close. So you can't always be on a show. Sometimes you have a run where you go from show to show to show, but then there might be a gap of 8 months or whatever. And so those relationships, it's not a hierarchy. It's a mutually beneficial relationships. I have subbed for Phil. Phil has subbed for me. This is how it works, and we're friends and colleagues, and you develop this network of people that and when you get called for, let's say, a fantastic gig somewhere else, you need to be able to take off to do that. So it's a benefit to you. It's not just a favor from the sub. It's like it's really a two-way street. So I just wanted to clarify on that. But to answer Simon's,
and on the other side, oh, sorry, continue.
No. Finish up with that topic, and then I'll get to your other question about the
I was going to say, so just a little more context. So if you're subbing on a show, oftentimes subs will need to be ready on a dime to play any number of shows, so a sub can be subbing on 5 shows at once, 8 shows at once, 10 shows at once. I know somebody who's doing 8 at a time right now, meaning that she has that 8 shows worth of music prepared in her head at all times, and feels comfortable, on an hour's notice, maybe on 2 days' notice, on a week's notice, going in and performing that music, on a high level. So subbing is, we can get into it. It is very, for me, nerve-wracking, and can be very challenging. But like you said, yeah, I mean, it is really, I don't think music on Broadway would be able to exist without the ability to do that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I'm sorry, continue.
And also one thing to note, just about, you say it's nerve-wracking. The reason, primary reason for that is that when you're a sub, there's no rehearsal. You have to learn the part on your own time. It's gotten a little bit easier over the years, because it used to be just like a cassette bad sounding cassette, that somebody handed you at a music, and you didn't understand how to get out of repeats and codas and all of this kind of stuff. Now we have videos of the conductor synced up to the music with the mix that can be earmarked more towards your instrument. It's made it easier to prepare, but still, that first show, you're going there cold. You've never rehearsed. You've never, maybe the section leader or somebody there, you ask a couple of questions. How do I get out of this repeat, whatever, but you got to go. So you have to, that's also an art form, learning how to prepare to sub, just knowing how much repetition you need to put in to feel comfortable. So yeah, I just want to get back to the other point, because I see we're gonna digressing a lot today, because there's lots of stuff to talk about. But so when I said it was an old school show, what do I mean? Beauty and the Beast was started in 1994. The mid 90s was kind of the tail end of the glory years of the New York freelance scene, where the top players were busy, very busy playing film scores. There were lots of successful sort of secondary classical orchestras, by which I mean not necessarily the Philharmonic or the Met, but all sorts of like Philharmonia Virtuosa, like very high-end groups that weren't like full season jobs. And you had a lot of people who were doing in that group of that community of doing the best work. However, it was starting to wane at that point. The film business started to recede in the early to mid 90s. It was still okay, but it really, with the advent of a lot of film scoring going to first London and then other places in Europe, New York suffered a lot on that. And what you saw was there were lots of very, very successful players, both on the orchestral side, but also on the rhythm section side, people who had been doing big tours, lots of big record sessions, this sort of thing, all of a sudden playing on Broadway, whereas that would have been unthinkable 5, 10, 15 years before. And so it was like a kind of an inflection point around that time where people who really felt like playing in a Broadway pit was kind of beneath them were having to start to take these jobs. So they brought a kind of a little bit of a resentment into it. And these were, again, to take that one step further, a lot of very established players. And, just like with any generational shift, especially if you're battling against your lessening of your own work, the last thing you want to see conceptually is folks in their early mid-20s starting to break in, because they're coming for you and they're going to eventually take over your job. This happens in every generation, and we can talk about that later if we want to. But in any case, this was really enforced at this time, because it wasn't just the generational, it was also a huge shift in the type of work in New York City. So for me, just kind of like waltzing in post-college, I think I like wore sandals to a show and I got to like really look. I'm serious. I'm like, what's wrong with you? like 96 degrees, of course I'm going to wear sandals, like little things that some might interpret them as being a little bit more professional, or others might interpret them as being a little more uptight, but I wasn't aware of any of them. And so on top of that, the fact that there were, I think, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, were there like 6 violins on that show? It was a big section.
Oh, that show. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, 6, right? So that's sizable, even at that time where there were bigger orchestras. So the guy who brought me in, it was like 1 against 5. Like nobody liked him. I had no idea at the time. And so there was additionally this kind of like inertia against him and his people. Plus I was 22, plus I was wearing sandals, plus I didn't really want to be there, plus I loved bluegrass. So it wasn't a great fit, but actually it was a seminal moment for me because it really set me on my own journey as a musician. That has led me, in large part back to playing on Broadway, but more on my own terms and with a better headspace about it.
Yeah. Just circling back to an anecdote about the generational shift. The very first show I ever played, I was subbing. I was incredibly nervous. I was 25 years old, and directly to my right was literally someone who spent years playing with Miles Davis, and is on albums with Miles, as well as one of the most insane careers you can think of. Somebody that I grew up listening to, and I have currently still obviously a ton of respect for. So, and here I am, 25. I think when I was 25, I looked like I was 14, and coming in and just being like, oh yeah, I think I can do this, and I'm sure I was probably wearing sandals as well. So that is a very real thing that we're dealing with. Anyway, thank you so much, Anton. I have so many more questions for you. There's so many things I want to talk about, but I want to get to some of our other amazing people here. Everyone here is such an incredible musician, and everyone here is someone I respect so much. So anyway, Emily Bauza, one of my favorite cellists ever. Somebody I have worked with many times, and is always the person I think of first if anybody in a room is needing a cello player. Anyway, can you tell us about yourself and what show you're on, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate the shout out. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, in the middle of the country, and I came to New York to go to Juilliard for college. And my first experience with Broadway was between years of my master's education, and I got rejected from all my summer festivals. So I thought, can I work in New York? And I happened to have an advisor in a pedagogy program at Juilliard who I knew worked in the New York freelance scene. And I didn't understand how it worked and what you needed to do. I just asked her if I had to audition or what I needed to do. And she just hooked me up with the right people at the right time. Someone at, it was the second incarnation of Les Miserables, was looking for cello subs and was having trouble finding someone to get approved. And this was my first experience, that show. It happened to be, as a kid, I came to New York to see the original version of Les Miserables. Antoine, how many years did it run?
Oh, it had to be about 18 to 20, something like that.
Okay, so like through the 80s.
And I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt you for 1 second. I'm so sorry, Emily. But just for people listening, when she mentions like getting approved, what that means quickly is that, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, is that the musical director with substitutes is in a position to allow or disallow their presence in the orchestra. And oftentimes that is that happens based on the performance of the first show, depending on the musical director, or maybe the first 2 or 3 shows. So please continue.
So I came into Les Miserables. It was a string quartet version, so it was actually pretty difficult. Even though I was in conservatory zone, I was also incredibly nervous. But I got good advice to how to prepare for Broadway, which at that time was no video. It was this would have been 2007 that I started, and I was 23. So there was no video, but you had just the audio recording and the music to learn. I played through it 3 times without having to stop, and then felt relatively prepared to come in, and it was a success. So from there, I met other people. I met Antoine very early on in kind of a funny situation with a cellist who needed a sub during, it was Spider-Man, the musical. And there was hundreds of previews. So another funny thing about Broadway is we have a period called lock-in when a show starts. So we have usually it's 6 weeks from when a show starts that you're not allowed to sub out. So these things that we've been talking about where we have another gig or we're sick or something, you're not allowed to do that. So during that time, there was an emergency and I had to come in very last minute to Spider-Man the musical. And again, it's just all these interpersonal relationships that lead to other paths and other shows and other connections. But that's sort of how I got my start in the scene.
Amazing. And currently you are playing?
Oh, currently I'm,
correct?
Sure, yeah. Currently I'm working on The Notebook on Broadway.
Mm-hmm. And that is, the music is by Ingrid Michaelson, correct?
Correct, yes. And it's actually kind of I've had some pretty fun situations on Broadway where I had an experience early on where I got a call. It happened to be my 30th birthday and I was in Barcelona partying. And I got a call saying, "What's your vocal range?" And as I'm a cellist, I thought this is incorrect. Someone made a mistake. But in fact, there were 4 musicians who were cited to perform in the show. They were saving a little bit of money. But so I had choreography rehearsals. I had my own dressing room and I would hang my cello on the wall and then someone would put a gospel robe on me. I had to go dance and sing in Violet, the musical.
Why is this the first I'm hearing of this?
Wait, really?
Same sentiment, Antoine.
I was in lights, Antoine. So often we're underground. And so I had that, and then currently in another fun thing is when you get on stage pay. So for The Notebook, we're actually on a platform above the stage. That's sorry if this is a spoiler, but that's exposed for the last 5 minutes of the show. So we get on stage pay for that, but have the ability to do other things during the show, which is maybe another conversation topic.
Right. So one thing I wanted to talk about is, we are all in a musicians union, and part of being in that union is if there are extra parameters to your job, like for example, appearing on stage versus appearing underground, or playing 5 instruments or playing one, versus 2 instruments, the pay structure changes slightly in a way. So that is what you're referring to. And I wanted to tell you, I did the opposite of you. I was asked one time to sub on a show, and I was looking for some work, and they were like, okay, so if you want to learn, it's guitar and acoustic and electric, and anyway, your dance rehearsal will be a week from Tuesday. And I just let me stop you right there. There's no way I'm dancing on a Broadway stage. It's not going to happen. But anyhow,
I did
thank
it.
you. And how did it go?
It was great. Yeah. These things, the thing that's cool about Broadway is, and it was new for me when I was coming from conservatory, is that you get to do things more than once, which later on becomes sort of a drag. But at the beginning, it was exciting because if you make a mistake the first time, then you get a chance to fix it. So for dancing and singing, which were not in my natural skill set, it was fun to get better at it. And then at a certain point, it became something I looked forward to.
I mean, hopefully you get another chance. Hopefully you get another chance to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's a very real part about, I'll be specific to playing music since we're with a bunch of musicians. I mean, that is a very real element to playing music professionally, is that there is very real pressure in the sense of like, this has to go well, in order for me to keep working here. And I want to, depending on what your situation is, continuing to work, I remember my first, the first time I subbed a show in 2007, that night literally doubled my net worth at the time, because I was struggling. I was struggling in catering events and, carting myself for hours on the subway around New York to, make a small amount of money teaching, a six-year-old how to play Here Comes the Sun or something like that. So, that is a very real element about what we do, is that, it's like, oh man, like I want this to go well because I want to do a good job. And also I kind of need this to go well, to keep going. Anyhow, thank you so much, Emily. Philip Bayton, who is a great musician, a great violinist. I first worked with off Broadway maybe 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, Peyton. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. It's super cool. From outside of Detroit originally. Went to University of Michigan and Cleveland Institute of Music, then played in New World Symphony for 4 years. Wasn't sure what I wanted to get on this audition track for orchestras, so moved to New York to try to freelance. Crashed on a buddy's couch who offered free rent for most of my first year, which was great. Started Broadway stuff, subbing probably around 2004. I'll tell that story in a minute. Currently, I'm in between shows. I just had to walk away from The Wiz on Broadway, which was an absolute blast, but I'm starting something in the fall, and they're closing in August, so I kind of had to leave for the summer, so I'm in between shows right now. But before that, had a run at Camelot, and before that, Music Man, and blah, blah, blah. But my first experience into the Broadway scene was on the infamous Phantom of the Opera, which I'm very tripped out because about a couple weeks ago, walking by the Majestic Theater, which had that show for my entire tenure in New York, is now taking in another show that's coming in the fall. So a very trippy turn of events. That ran 35, 36, something like that, guys. Phantom, I want to say.
Yeah, something like that,
right.
yeah.
Which was probably employed, I don't know, 15,000 violinists over 30 years, something like just amazing amount of subs there, 6 violins. So I'm freelancing a lot of, let's say, lowball gigs in the early 2000s. And I end up on this recording session with some pretty well off people that I'd done a little bit of research, kind of just learning how to use computers at that point, and had email, but we weren't really that technologically inclined at that point. So
right, and social media was, as we all know, was like
non-existent.
Really, yeah.
And so if you wanted to find out who was in a pit, you had to go to the union or get a union book or talk to people and find out that who was in what pit and what show. So I had done a little bit of research, and I wound up with on the session with somebody that was in Phantom, and a wonderfully gifted and incredibly strong woman named Gail Dixon, who passed away. Rest in peace, Gail. And I'd never met her before, but I met her on this session. A couple of days later, I re-log into my email, which I had forgotten how to do, and emailed Gail and said, "Miss Dixon, I'm curious how this Broadway situation works. I don't know how to break in and all that kind of thing." And Gail, being the person she was like, "Well, okay, why don't you come get the book for Phantom tomorrow and sub for me this weekend?" So this was maybe a Wednesday or something like that. I go in on a Thursday, and watching the book means you go into the pit. You have the music hopefully in your hand, and this basically looked like, I don't know, hieroglyphics or something like that. This part was so old and falling apart and had so many things written on it, and it's basically handwritten, hand transcribed, so it is illegible. So all notes above a certain thing, all the legible lines look exactly the same, illegible. But they were very used to it, so it was all good for them.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty amazing. And no recording. At least I was not given the audio recording. I didn't think to bring a recording device in because nobody told me to. So I did the sitting thing the next day after I emailed her, sitting in. And that means you're in the pit, hopefully next to the person that you're going to play in their chair. Hopefully. Sometimes you're on the other side of the pit in an entirely different section. Sometimes you're in another room. Sometimes you're outside of the pit looking at a monitor that's very blurry and unclear, and maybe not even really hearing what's going on in the pit as much as you will when you actually play the show. So I sat in, tried to take as many notes as I could, nobody told me, like Antoine had said, this is a very old school show as well. And I was not given any kind of radar tips of who to look out for and who to be extremely polite to and who to avoid entirely and all those kind of things. And now you can kind of research that pretty easily. But back then it was not even a factor, not even a thought. And so I spent the next 48 hours or something like that just cramming in this illegible music. And of course, a lot of that Phantom of the Opera is familiar to me. I think I saw it when I was a kid in Detroit. Probably the first musical I ever saw. A lot of the tunes that you cannot get out of your head pop up and still illegible on the music. But anyway, so I go in about 3 days later, something like that, 4 days later after watching the book. And this was one of those experiences like Simon, I was petrified, literally petrified. And there were a couple characters in that pit and that will remain nameless.
No, it's okay.
Should I bust it out? Who kind of seem to make it their duty to make you as uncomfortable as humanly possible.
Yeah.
So I sit down in the sixth chair of the six violins, and I put my case in a place that I clearly was not supposed to put it. And the way that show starts is with complete silence, and there's just dialogue on stage. And so they start the show, and I'm looking up, just looking at the conductor, waiting for the first cue and all that. And my case comes flying back past me into the bass player behind me. Somebody just like this, didn't even look, swatted it back. Right? And it makes this huge sound, which almost sounds like it's coming from the stage. And if you're talking about a heartbeat in your head and a cold sweat, can't feel your hands, you name it, I had it. The laundry list of junk that happens to you when you're in that state. And person didn't even look back, didn't say anything. So I started doing some breathing exercises, and I happened to have another sub next to me. I should have mentioned that before, as opposed to one of the regulars. And this person really clearly knew what was going on around and knew these other people that were used to making people uncomfortable or made it their duty or whatever you want to say. So put a hand on my arm and just looked at me and was like, kind of breathe. It's cool. Kind of really helped me in the first, like, yeah, it was pretty amazing. And she was an awesome person. And I still get to work around her a little bit and still remember to thank her as many times as I can. But yeah, so the show starts, and thankfully it doesn't really start with a lot of playing. There's a big recording in the beginning, a synthesizer. And by the time I had to play, at least I could feel my hands again a couple minutes later. But that show went okay. It went okay enough to get invited back. Ended up working there. I made a lot of money through that show, and I'm very grateful to Miss Dixon for making that happen. But yeah, and then you learn. I mean, I subbed there for over 20 years basically, and on and off in between when I didn't have a show, and people would always invite me back. The rest of that section also, they all start kind of sharing subs and inviting you, which is nice. So you make some contacts through there, and from there, basically was you get into the contact zone and your name gets around a little bit, and other shows popped up and started subbing on a few other shows on other instruments. Took up viola again just to be able to work more. Had one situation playing your gentleman's instrument that we'll maybe get into later. It's a long story, but I had to do a double on a guitar, which was also the other most terrifying moment of my existence. At Spring Awakening. Yeah, that's kind of how I got my start, and ended up in between shows and freelancing a lot of classical stuff and still do. And it's a nice balance. And when you have that chair and you're there 50% of the time, it's it's a great check. That great office job you don't have to be at all the time, and hopefully you line up with a situation that the people around you in the pit and on stage and the backstage crew are all very nice. That the doorman is nice into your theater, or person, I should say. All that kind of stuff can line up really well, or it could be very, very traumatizing.
You know, I don't want to embarrass you, but I just want to give some context. It is incredible and insane that you prepared that show in, you said 2 days, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, that is, so for context, I would say the average preparation time would be, I mean, what would you get? Does anyone chime in? I mean, a month, 3 weeks, 2, 3, 4, 5?
I think it's probably less for string players.
Okay.
Maybe you could, I would say a week. The expectation is it could be a week. 3 days is very unusual.
Yep.
But
If you can't read the music.
yeah. But I mean, for guitar, a lot of technical like aspects, multiple instruments, you get more of a heads up, I think.
Yeah, and you know, I also want
quickly to one thing Phil said that's I think really important is that and it was very much implied in what Phil was saying, is that one of the best things about being a Broadway musician is that it's a very social environment. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're only working, like most shows, you know, let's say around 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever per show, with an intermission, you know. So all of our best friends are also players because there's this camaraderie. Yes, I mean, we've talked a little bit about like the scary people that we've come across, but for the most part, you know, like I've played shows with Phil, I've played shows with Emily. John has subbed on a couple of shows that I've played. We haven't had too much commingling there, but you know, almost everybody in shows, like you get your sort of community, you go to dinner before, you might grab a drink after, you get into this kind of rhythm, and it's a situation where, especially if it's a good scene, you really look forward to going to work because it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like hanging out with your friends and like you're playing in between hanging out with your friends. So that's the best of it. And, you know, once you find your footing and kind of become a little bit more established and start to get your own shows, and then, you know, you get in a situation like, I'm sure this has happened for all of us, like we're able to, like whether we're section leaders, we're able to recommend the people we want to be sitting around. I've had shows where I've been able to say, hey, I actually want Emily to play cello. And Phil has had shows where so on and so forth. And Simon, same thing, you know. And so that's nice because you can start to like form, like travel a little bit with your clique. It doesn't happen all the time, but it just creates a really good working environment when it works. So I just wanted to interject that because it's not all scary, you know, jaded players want the worst for you. You know, and as a matter of fact, one of the nicest things, you know, like we all were helped, you know, me by my first violin, even if nobody liked my violin teacher, you know, he helped me, you know. And then when I came back to New York, there were a few other people that, similar to Phil, like I sat next to somebody on a recording session, and I can draw a direct line from that moment to a substantial amount of what I've gotten into subsequently. And that's an amazing feeling. And I've tried to do that in reverse. Like I know for a fact that I've brought in as first time people who had never subbed before, people who are now extremely established on Broadway. And that's a really nice feeling because they were very good players. They deserved it. And, you know, you get mentored and you can help on the other side. So that's a nice aspect of the continuum. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something similar, and thank you so much for saying that. Like, it is very easy and fun, quite frankly, to share anecdotes about, you know, really difficult or stressful moments. You know, especially when you look back, when you're looking back on them. But you know, we consequently, like you're saying, you know, there's so many amazing people that you meet from with different backgrounds, with different resumes. You know, people. I remember subbing on a show once, and there was a trombone player who had played with the Rolling Stones and was on stage at the first rock concert I ever saw when I was 8 years old. And I got to be like, oh, I saw you in San Diego, California in 1990, you know, or whatever it was. So, you know, it is like this really wild experience that I don't think you get anywhere else. And yeah, so I wanted to say that too. But that being said, my first show ever, I also had it was a crazy nightmare. But anyway, I wanted to make our way around the room. John Kangla, amazing guitar player, friend of mine. Could you tell us about yourself and what shows you're playing and a little bit about your history?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. Good to see everyone. Yeah, my name's John. I'm from Ohio. I grew up around the Columbus area and then moved to New York about 16 years ago or something like that. And I got into Broadway, I guess 2 or 3 years after I got to the city. I kind of had a different experience than, say, what some of these other guys were talking about in terms of like the formalness of the show that I got into for the first time was a show called Rock of Ages. So it was very different from the kind of traditional orchestra in the pit setup where you can't even sometimes see the audience. And it was a show where you're on stage playing rock songs, which I think is the only way that I could have gotten in for the first time, because I came from that world of just like playing in bands and going on tours and playing music like that. And a friend of mine from Ohio was on that show and invited me to join and to sub, like they were talking about, for the first time. So I did that and got my recording and learned the show. And yeah, it was, I think that kind of having that bridge from like just playing in bands was what got me in. I don't know how I would have sat down in the pit for the first time. You know, that came later for me, fortunately. Yeah, it was a very surreal experience. You know, they wanted me to wear a wig at one point. We were on stage. You know, people are dancing. I was like, wow, this is new. But it was great. And then from there, I got the opportunity to do some other shows. Let's see. Sorry, currently I'm subbing on Hamilton and on Aladdin, and yeah, it's been quite a ride. My last show was the last show that I had a chair on, or I guess my kind of first official Broadway debut show was Almost Famous, which happened. It ended the beginning of last year, I guess. Mm-hmm. That was another rock musical. Yeah. What am I missing here?
Yeah, I love that. Can you bring up something that, well, first I want everybody to meet Meg, but after we do that, you bring up something that I want to come back to, which is one thing about Broadway is like this experience of like being seen versus being hidden. Playing, like, many of us have played, all of us play concerts and do things on stage to a bunch of people. When I go to work at night, I'm hidden, no one can see me. So, I mean, it's kind of a interesting dichotomy that I want to get into. But before we do that, I wanted to talk to Meg, who's an amazing pianist and also a conductor. She and music director. We met many years ago, and she is somebody that was conducting a show that I was subbing on, and got to experience me at my most frantic, I would say. But Meg, I'm so happy you joined us. Can you tell us about yourself and talk about what show you're on and a little bit about your history? Also, I think you might be muted.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Meg. I am currently in New Jersey, and I'm from New Jersey, so I've kind of stayed put here. I went to school at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh for classical piano. Emily, you mentioned before being in the conservatory zone. I grew up in the concerto competition space. But my dad is a blues guitarist, so it would be like practicing classical rep and then trying to play along with the radio or with him, and just always kind of having a bit of both worlds. I came into Broadway. I was working for a long time at Paper Mill Playhouse, which is a regional theater, also in New Jersey.
We were getting together, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And a Broadway kind of guardian angel, her name is Mary Mitchell Campbell, was there, and we were working on a project together. And essentially she was like, I'm recommending you to these people who need some help at Matilda, which was a Broadway show a few years back, which is a crossover score. So there were a lot of like rhapsodic soloistic moments, but then also a lot of pop music. And so it was kind of a perfect way to start subbing and having people hear me play. And a contractor who unfortunately has now passed away, Howie Joins, was the drummer there. And we formed a relationship by playing there together, and he kind of also took me under his wing, which led to many other opportunities, including Mean Girls, which is where Simon and I played together. And I also have spent a lot of time teaching in the public schools. I'm working as a music therapist for Music and Autism, and I work a lot with Maestro, which is an organization looking to increase visibility and gender parity in the Broadway space.
So Meg, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask you. Like, so can you talk about, so as a conductor, I mean, can you talk about that job? Because you have the cast, you have the dancers, like the tempos are important to the dancers. You have the singers, you have a band that could be, you know, 10 or 15 or something people. Can you talk about that experience and how does it work? What is it like? How do you approach that experience?
Sure. This makes me think there's a new social media account called Memes on Broadway. I think it's Memes on B-Way. And there was one recently that was like, life of a music director, 80% email, 10% people management, 10% music, which is an exaggeration, of course, but it is so much about interpersonal connection and management and managing personalities, and also trying to find ways to communicate notes to people based on whatever speaks to them the most. You know, some players I find appreciate like seeing it in email. Some people appreciate like going and talking to something together. As for handling actors and the variability that comes with that, yeah, that you kind of take on the role of a therapist, I would say, and I say this with love. But there's kind of like a lot of emotional weight that you end up inheriting to help kind of keep the building running. And something I always like to think about is in most houses, the conductor's face is what is replicated on like, you know, 100 TVs throughout the building. And every department is kind of following and watching the conductor throughout the whole evening. And many times I've heard like crew members, you know, whether it's like the spot op or the stage manager, they're like, thank you for bringing the building together in like almost a spiritual energy sense. So I take that part really seriously. And I feel like also for players, I notice that players are just like having more fun and feeling more comfortable if they're able to feel like we are rooting for them rather than just waiting for the next measure of something to go wrong, like Philip was referring to before, just like that, you know, heading into a building as an intimidator as opposed to the better choice, which is to be a collaborator. So those are just some snippets of what I like to behold. And I forgot to mention, I'm currently a cabaret. So that's another show where like we're on stage, we're in a costume, we are screaming fake German, and yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, it's to, the conducting thing is so fascinating to me. Can I ask you more, like, I guess, can you tell us a little bit about like, talk to me about the experience as the show is happening and you're doing your job, you know, are you thinking about the musicians? Are you thinking about the actors? Are you focusing on 40 things at once? Are you focusing on one thing at once? Like, can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I always say that, like, you know, if a civilian asks me, like, what's your life like? And I'm like, well, the easiest part of my day is at 8 p.m. Like when we start the show, then I feel like I'm just in natural taking on whatever comes at us. I do think it's, you know, we're thinking about 100,000 million things at a time. And especially these days, most of the chairs we're also playing keyboard or like triggering Ableton or doing a lot of tech while conducting. So inherently we are thinking about many things, but I try to just like be playing music with other people. I've played with Philip really recently, and like it's so nice to just like be friends in the pit and try and make music and try and shift and flow. So yeah, I think the answer is yes to either thinking about a million things or just like trying to streamline and playing an ensemble.
So earlier in this discussion, we were talking about what subbing is, how it works, what it's like, the pressure that the subs are under, that we've all experienced, you know, the ins and outs of it. So can you talk to us about like your side of that? So like, I have subbed for a show that you were conducting, you know, so you know I've kind of experienced. We have that relationship, but can you talk to me about like your mindset, like if somebody who has a pivotal role in the orchestra, like with a lot of solos or something like that, is there for the first time? What is that like for you?
That's a great question. I often work as the associate music director also, so I'll try to answer this though from the music director perspective. A lot of soloists like that sometimes will want to work on something before the show, especially drummers. Like they, even more and more recently, I've heard of conductors like bringing in the drummer for 30 minutes and just playing through a couple of things, or like a super exposed string soloist. I don't know, the string players on this call would be able to answer that better. There's always the opportunity to connect with them, but really I just try and, you know, observe and kind of keep a watch on the book and think about, oh, they've watched a few times. I feel like we can feel secure about this. And then just, you know, really try and support them as much as I can and carve out a little bit more of the day-to-day conducting and like look right at them and bring them in a little bit more overtly than we would.
Sure.
The separate part of this answer, which is like on the show I'm at right now, lovingly, I'd say our stars are very in tune with the musicians and the subs, and they are highly aware of who's in and when there's a sub and which moments matter. So that I go back to like the bearing that the weight of that and kind of massaging that if we need to support new sounds in those spots, if you will.
Can I just?
That's cool. So, please.
Yeah. No, because Meg brings a really good point from the ND point of view. As a player, it's similar, but there is a little bit of a distinction, which is that our job as regulars is to take care of our chair. So as such, we are supposed to, based on availability and other factors, bring in the people who we think are the best for that show. Sometimes where things can go a little bit astray is that people get into just kind of like by rote or just the standard, these are my people, these are who sub. Like the show that I'm doing now is a couple of very difficult books. Our lead trumpet book is very difficult. And some people have come in and done very well, and some people have done less well. And you're never exactly sure, is that because that's just who's available? Is that because it hasn't really totally been thought out who should come in, even if it's outside? So, you know, what I was talking about before, and I'm sure that just as string players, because Phil has played a lot of concertmaster books, so he's sort of in charge of the section. Obviously, with cello is within a section, but usually there's only one cellist, so Emily functions as a soloist in that regard. I've had a lot of shows where I've had to be completely like, I'm not going to bring my usual people in because a different skill set is needed, either more technique, maybe different stylistic. Like the last show I did prior to this one was a country show called Shucked. So there was some legit playing, there was a little bit of fiddling, there was a little bit of mandolin. And so all of a sudden, okay, you know, you want to help your people, but I couldn't use any of them, you know, on that show. Or maybe one was able to cross over. So as players, you know, it's our responsibility to assist the production and the music director so that they don't have those nerves. We're taking care of our business, and that doesn't always work out, but conceptually, we're bringing in people who should be able, all things being equal, to handle the rigors of the part and take that anxiety away from a music director who, as you mentioned, has much bigger things to think about during a show than whether or not the violin sub is going to be able to come in on time on a solo. So just wanted to bring that up.
There's
Like
something also
specifically-
for, sorry.
Please. No, please.
There's something
Please.
for subbing where when you're choosing who you want to bring in, you want someone who sounds somewhat similar to you. Say for the Notebook that I'm on now, it's very exposed. And so it's jarring to people who've done this 8 shows a week for however many weeks to hear someone who is maybe more tentative or whatever, just a different style of playing. So when I'm thinking of who I want to bring in, I try to think someone who would match my sound more.
Yeah.
Which I think alleviates some of the stress for everyone else.
Yeah. But circling back, so Meg, I mean, I'm so curious because, so for some context, Meg was the associate conductor at Mean Girls, which is a musical that ran for a while. And there was a introduction. So I was a guitar sub on that show. There were 2 guitar books. So the show started, there was a brief introduction, and then there was 1, 2, 3, 4 solo acoustic guitar, the only thing happening for like a little while. I don't remember, maybe a minute or 2 minutes or something like that. And it's just acoustic guitar by itself. So from the perspective of somebody, me and other people who did that, I'm thinking I've never done this. I mean, I've practiced it, but I haven't done it for real. And essentially, I mean, the show is resting on this moment in a real sense. So Meg, from your perspective as somebody who was conducted me and a bunch of other people in that moment, what is going through your head? You're like, everything's going to be fine. This is great. Or are you thinking like, oh, boy, I hope this person does this well? Like, what's going through your head?
Yeah, definitely option number 2. I mean, there's like billions of dollars of pressure on us. And, you know, there's this, you know, for Broadway, at least, we have the show report, which is like an email that goes to literally anyone that is producing the show and all of the department heads. And if it's a new musical, the people who wrote the show, like everyone gets this email. And I always say the goal is for nothing music related to make it into the show report, except like that violin solo sub was amazing and they changed everything, you know. So Simon, in that particular moment, just from a commercial standpoint, no, I was always, especially if it was a first time sub, as you said, it's just so exposed, and Ben and Matt had such a specific approach to it that those are the names of the regulars, that you just are still optimistic, but I would say the overriding feeling that I would have in that moment is like complete chaotic mania. And then like in 4 beats, we're like, cool, they came in, it's great, let's have a great time.
Yeah. Optimistic, but also chaotic mania. I think it's a great underlying theme for this competition in general, by the way. But anyhow, so one thing, like we were saying a little bit earlier, that is in many cases unique to playing on Broadway is that, like, in the majority of cases, I think it's fair to say that we are hidden from view, right? We're in an orchestra pit, we're underneath the stage, no one can see you. I think many of us have played shows where we were visible or we're not visible. Maybe the show that I'm on, I'm not visible at all. And people have different musicians. Everybody here has done a lot of things in front of thousands of people and you know, in coffee shops and in stadiums and arenas and the whole spectrum. So can we talk about like that juxtaposition, that experience, and what it's like? Some people really yearn to be visible. Some people don't care at all. So I think there's kind of a lot to talk about there. Like Emily, can you talk about that? I mean, I know that you've done
Sure.
good concerts at the place, and you've also been hidden, and you've done it all. So can you tell us what that is like for you?
Okay, full disclosure. So I often yearn to be on stage because it's a different connection with the audience. Antoine and I did an amazing show called Fun Home a few years back where we were on the stage and a part of the show too. It was in the round, so we were very much involved and engaged. It was a short show, that particular one, so it was under 2 hours. So it also requires more attention from us, and the monotony of doing it 8 times a week builds up for when you're on stage like that. Ultimately, I think I still enjoy that more. But then there's the other side of things where when you're not exposed, and this is a little bit of a Broadway secret for people paying a lot of money to come see shows, is that we're often reading or doing crosswords during the show when we're not playing. So there's this, like Antoine said, it's fun to show up to work. It's fun to go read my book that I've been looking forward to reading, you know? So it's just like a side that I'm playing music and engaged during those portions of the show. And then you're sort of able to shut off your brain and focus on something else. So there are these two experiences with playing Broadway, probably more, but I would say those are the main things. And there's plus and minuses to both of them. But I do, you know, we're performers at the end of the day, and I do often miss engaging with audiences when I'm underground for too long. So that's when the 50% is nice, when you can take other gigs where you, say I play a quartet concert or I go on tour with a band for a bit. Those balance the reading of a book underground wearing black all day. So there are plus and minuses, I would say. Simon's disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, yeah, no, you know, there are lots of variables. One of the things that we all need to protect against, especially in shows that start to run for a long time, and long time doesn't have to mean Phantom of the Opera long. It can mean 8 months, 10 months, a year and a half. That's still a long time when you're, you know, playing the same part night after night. And actually, one of the things that's so nice about the freelance experience in New York is that, especially if you become a little bit more established, that you do have a lot of variety. You know, as Emily mentioned, and John mentioned, you know, he tours with his band, he subs on Broadway, does this. Phil, I know, does a lot of still sort of classical music concerts. We do recordings. I mean, it just, I think as an MD, Meg, you're probably like that, pretty focused on that, but you have your teaching and the other things that you mentioned. Variety is the key to, I think, a little bit more of a clear mind. I think where pits can get a little bit more contentious and dark is when you have a lot of players who don't take off that much, and they kind of bring that a little bit of that resentment and that negative energy. But to Emily's point, there are a lot of variables. Like for instance, these days, and Meg talked about this, many shows have a significant electronic or tech element. And so as string players in particular, sometimes we don't feel like we have very much impact. I've played shows where I know that my line 95% of the time is being doubled on not one, but 2 keyboards, you know, plus other horn lines and everything else. That does take a little bit out of the I'm an artist vibe, out of the motivation. But on the flip side, like the show that Emily was talking about, Fun Home, was a beautiful show, 7-piece band. Everybody had a key part, all acoustic. I mean, there was a keyboard, but it was just a piano sound.
We in fact played an acoustic show once. You weren't there, I don't think. But yeah, the soundboard broke 30 minutes before the show, and we played an acoustic Broadway show. It was
amazing.
unbelievable.
Yeah, but like these big heavy tech shows, they can be a little bit less rewarding, and therefore being in a pit offers you, in other words, being hidden offers you a little bit of a reprieve from that. Obviously, we're professionals. We play our best in that given moment, but it's a little bit harder to engage show after show after show when it's that situation. If you have a show that's either like another show that actually Phil and I did together for, I think it was like 6 days because I replaced you, was Kinky Boots, which was like one of the most fun shows ever.
That's right.
That's like a whole different category. That was just like fun. It wasn't difficult. It was definitely lots of like electronics. The parts weren't like particularly that inspiring as players, but it was just such a good vibe that's actually makes it like a really terrific way to go to work on that side of it. But in terms of playing, right, like Emily said, the Notebook, difficult part, smallish band, really excellent.
Sorry, not difficult, exposed.
Exposed, okay. But
That's not difficult for you. It's not difficult for you.
That's true. That's true.
That orchestrator, the guy, in other words, the person who wrote those charts is excellent, and that every instrument is going to have like really nice and important things to play. Those are the best shows to play for where you feel like you're contributing. Otherwise, a really fun show like Kinky Boots, where you're not necessarily contributing that much, but having a blast is the other way to go.
Every night.
Yeah.
We should talk a little bit about the orchestrations, maybe, how that affects our impact on the show, or how it affects our experience on the show.
Yeah.
Because it's such a huge deal for Broadway shows, whoever orchestrates it. And if someone, I remember, in fact, the guy who did The Notebook, John Clancy, when he first started orchestrating, I remember him asking me so many questions about the cello. And does this work? Is this fun to play? And now every time I play a show of his, I know that it's going to be fun for cello because he did the work, asked the questions, and cares that everyone has a good time while they're playing.
Also, was the orchestra fun though? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that I think varies based on experience or maybe where somebody is working show to show is there are some environments that are like have some level of being open to interpretation, right? And then there are others that are like, this is note for note, like hyper specific, right? So have you guys experienced, like I've definitely experienced the two of those. Has anybody also experienced that? Like, how do you navigate like, well, I'm pretty sure I might be able to, like recently at my show, I was like, you know what? I'm going to play a little guitar solo on the bows at this one part that's free. And then I'm going to see if anybody says anything. And they liked it. They're like, hey, that was awesome. That was great. Do that again. I was like, okay, awesome. But there was some risk. I was like, well, I think they're going to like this. I'm going to go for it. But also I've not done that in some other situations. So like, has anybody experienced that or like talked about like,
Yeah,
how,
for sure.
Enter your own expertise, right? Versus when you be like, okay, yeah, I'll do it quickly like this.
I think just on shows that I've subbed on, that's kind of a thing you have to understand going into it, where that show fits on that spectrum. Is it something like you're talking about Kinky Boots was a pretty loose show where there was a lot of room for interpretation. Hamilton, which is a show I started doing right around the same time, I guess, or a little bit after, is extremely specific, and everything has to be tucked in exactly as it's meant to be. So yeah, I mean that's such a big part of learning how to sub is to learn how to interpret and how to just figure out your own way to copy exactly what somebody else is doing and make that sound with whatever way you can, which might be different for you than it is for them, in terms of the technique that it requires, or like as a guitar player, like what kind of pick you want to play with to get that sound versus what I, something like that. Those are all challenges, and kind of things that make, I guess, each of those different types of shows interesting, in a way. Kind of, I guess it sort of comes back to like what you guys were talking about with being on stage and being off stage, and having like the idea of the audience to draw you into the performance, or like if there's dancing or choreography, like that can kind of be a way to like, oh, I'm doing a Broadway show, but I have to remember that when I play with this riff, I have to walk to this part of the stage and then turn around and this happens. And that kind of like draws you into the performance. When you're sitting beneath a pit, there has to be other things, I think, or at least I need those things to kind of like check in with that and build that sort of presence and connection with the audience. So that's kind of where I guess I like those shows with that super specific, like this is exactly the way it needs to be, because you can kind of just really nerd out and almost be a student as you continue the process of performing, as a way to sort of like, as a sort of a way to strengthen that, connection with the audience and the performance.
I think there's a distinction there between rhythm section and string. Like string players, we have to play the part. Although I do remember a few extra notes there, Phil, Kinky Boots. But year 5 things.
Unison wasn't that interesting after the first couple months,
Yeah, but for the most part, like I referred to the show I previously played to Great Gatsby was Shocked. That was a country show, and so there were some opportunities within there to do a little bit of your own thing, which was why I referenced that I needed a different pool of subs than my usual. But that was that show specifically. Otherwise, string players were not really given any leeway. You're playing this part, and if there is a little bit of soloing opportunity, like improvising opportunity, that'll lie in the keyboard or guitar, maybe sax for a given moment. But to what Emily was saying before, we want to bring in people who sound as much like us as possible to make the production consistent, to make the music director happy, to have actors know exactly when they're coming in, like not getting confused by different, phrasing or what have you. So we're really much more tied to really just learning the part as well as the regular does it and playing it as such.
And if you add a slide in or something like that, that's almost, especially for newer shows, I've found that's an immediate note to take it out, right? And even if you're trying to give your half a second personal touch to it, I learned like 15 years ago, don't worry about it. I'll find that expression in another gig. It's okay.
And another distinction to make is that depending on what instrument you play, string players, you are bringing your instrument to the show and you are playing the instrument that you know and have owned for many years, ostensibly. For a lot of other people, piano, guitar, bass, drums, percussion, and probably some other things. We are literally not playing our instruments. So, if you're somebody on a show, you're going to show up and you'll be like, okay, cool. So there are, 4 guitars here, and they're all different than the way I'm used to. And you have to make that adjustment. And then that kind of adds to, the spectrum of like, how do I sound like this person? But then also, to the other end, it's like, well, also, I have different arms than John, who also plays guitar, right? So, there's just no way. With an acoustic instrument, I think especially, there's no way to replicate. It's just like, well, we have different. If you want to get metaphysical about it, but we have different hands and fingers and arms. So there's going to be a difference. So Meg, as a conductor, how do you think about that? I've experienced with different people, different things, like really want it to sound exactly like this person. And, where I'm working now, our music director he just wants you to play well, and if the tone is slightly different, I've never heard him have an issue with it. So, Meg, as a conductor, can you talk about that?
Sure. It depends on the show. Also, I'm having like really visceral responses to like what Philip said about the if there's like an appoggiatura that suddenly appears. Sometimes I love that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I know the people in this building have heard that, and I'm going to get an email about. Every building is so different. West Side Story, which I played together with Emily, we played on an acoustic piano, which Simon, I know you have at Aladdin also, which is just a dream. Wish we had them more. But at that, I was the regular there, and I had trouble. The music director had trouble with like getting to communicate to the subs, like the amount of power or the dynamic range or the detail of pedaling, all of which, once you're playing on an acoustic piano, are so much more noticeable, not only to the conductor, but to everyone else that's playing ensemble passages with the piano. Whereas at Cabaret, I'm playing accordion throughout the show, and all that really matters is that the volume is similar, but everyone else has a completely different, as you said, like to highlight the physical thing, like some of us are playing with stronger arms, some of us are playing with a bit more delicate touch. The bellow breathing is not marked in, so some of us are playing 4 bars like this, and some of us are playing 4 bars like that. So there's a lot of variety, and our supervisor there, as you had mentioned, Simon, is just wanting, the best performance, but also to hear a bit of individuality, which in some other shows, of course, is not what would be encouraged. So it for me really varies based on the genre of the show, and also just the show itself and the people that are involved with that show.
Yeah, I mean, especially with a piano, one piano and 5 people have it. That situation has the ability, it could sound like a completely different instrument. Like, wow, is that the same piano as, because it's so personal to your body and your movements. So like, it's a really wild thing to think about from the perspective of like somebody conducting who's getting emails and notes and like all these things, and we want to make it work. It's just like, yeah, how do you, there's a balance in there. And I think for different people, obviously for different people, it's like in a different place, but it's like a really wild, specific thing to think about. I mean, especially because as musicians, as professional musicians, I mean, you spend all your time thinking about your sound. Like, how do I get a nice sound out of this instrument? Like, how do I make this project? How do I get the nuance of it? So it's like a very wild perspective and dimension to think about. It's like, okay, well, now I'm shifting that to like, how do I make this guitar sound exactly like this person who I know? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. I have some other questions for you guys. We've talked about orchestrations. We've talked about subbing. We've talked about, let's talk about something that I'm fascinated by, which is everybody makes mistakes. Can you guys talk about, like, does anybody have like mentally, especially if you're playing a show 8 times in a row or 50 times in a row, you're going to make a mistake. As a sub, you're going to make a mistake. As a regular, you're going to make a mistake. Sometimes it's out of your control. Yesterday, I came in for an explosive moment. The string on my acoustic guitar had slipped. Like, I tuned it maybe a minute prior, and it slipped, and it went really flat. It sounded bad. It's what can you do? I mean, it's just a thing that happens. So
showbiz,
right. Yeah. So can you guys talk about how you manage that situation? I mean, it's like if you're I hate to make a sports analogy, but if you're a pitcher and somebody hits a home run off of you, but you have 5 more innings to go, you have to move on, right? You can't think about it. I mean, how do you guys? Does someone want to talk about?
I'll chime in.
Yeah.
Something that I think is unique to Broadway because of the repetition that we have is, and it's happened to me several times. It's happened to a lot of friends, where you're playing the show and then you hear something different, and then something's missing, and you realize it's you that you forgot to play. Yeah. This is like, our heads do such strange things for this type of work that It's alarming. And then I've gotten lost in the music before that I've played hundreds of times, where I'm looking at the page and I don't know where I am, but my hands keep moving because they know what to do. But I think that's a very unique to Broadway with the amount of shows we play of the same music.
I think that everybody's going to make mistakes. Even the incredible singer, the lead actor, actress, the music director. You obviously try to minimize, but at the end of the day, there are very few, especially if you sort of establish yourself, you have a lot of leeway if it's, you've subbed a lot at a show and it developed, built up a lot of sort of goodwill and understanding, or if you're a regular and usually you play great and you made a mistake or two, it's not really a factor. The show's not falling apart because you forgot to come in for 3 bars. Our professionalism and the show and everything, obviously you don't want to do that. So I'm not minimizing it in that sense, but it doesn't often rattle you. Things that get a little bit scarier are when there's rhythmic shifts. Maybe something like there's a drum sub and a keyboard sub who aren't lining up in a sensitive moment, and then other people are dependent on coming in off of that eighth note pattern or whatever, and it gets kind of swingy. Those can be a little bit anxiety inducing for us, so I'm sure Megan for you a lot more. But specific mistakes, that I think is pretty easy once you're established in the show, obviously as a regular, but even as a regular sub, as a first, second, third time sub, you're worried that any big mistake, you might get cut, and there's that whole other thing. But once you're in, I don't know, Phil, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I just remember the early on, what I felt were cataclysmic events, right? That were just okay, I'm gonna have to move out of New York next week, kind of situation. And I've been lucky, maybe, or whatever you want to call it, but they weren't a big deal. And when I actually you get so used to maybe doing well, not that, this is most people, because we get established, at least most of our immediate circle, which we're lucky to be surrounded by such fabulous players and lovely people, generally speaking. When something does happen now, I kind of wow, whoa. And then if I get a note, I'm like, oh my God, but it goes away. It dissipates within seconds, honestly. And the next day it's not the end of the world. And generally speaking, more people now, especially recently, are much more understanding of these situations. 20 years ago, I would not say the same thing. There was definitely a different vibe that way, but yeah, it's not almost anything, especially I'm speaking for string players mostly.
Sure.
It's not the end of the world. I mean, you come in so prepared, and the show, if it's your show, most things that happen, even if you do space out, there's no real consequence, generally speaking. Has been my experience.
If it doesn't happen often.
But still,
right, which it doesn't in my experience. I know. I mean, not just for me, but people around me,
Phil, though, because I'd like to ask you, I understand we're kind of talking about what if somebody makes a mistake from the perspective of the show, the global show, but making an error and being able to be shake it off and move on, that's not a universal experience for all musicians, nor people who work in wherever you work, factories or an office or whatever. So, Phil, you were just saying okay, well, it's fine and it's cool and I'm going to go on, but that's, you did work to arrive at that mindset, I'm assuming, or have you always felt like that, or?
No, absolutely not. And even now, like I said, though, if I do get a note, it's jarring, and as a sub, right? And that's just the buildup of experience and realizing over and over again repetitively that it's really not the end of the world. And over time in multiple shows, as a sub, I'm speaking mostly, at least the amount of preparation that I learned to get to that level of hyper specificness. So you that one thing is flat, or you missed one 16th note, 60th note pattern. To me, even 15 years ago, something like that, I'd be like, oh my goodness, okay, yeah, done. But yeah, just build up and realizing that there really is no consequence. Most people are supportive. Most people are supportive, even though we started all of our times talking about these incredible jarring events that we had. You know, it's first time subs, at least, you know, in the very beginning. Yeah, it's just a building up the tolerance and that just kind of naturally builds up confidence for me, right? Yeah. And I'm still always referencing those mistakes. To be honest, I could really viscerally remember them in whatever show it was, and then trying to remember the consequence. I mean, or the result. And the result has, I've been lucky enough not to get cut from any sub list. I've been lucky enough not to be asked to leave a show or anything like that. You know, so everything is just a tolerance of just an understanding of the experience. And here's what it equated to, and it didn't equate it too much. And generally,
do you know what that's
please.
Actually a really good point, that it's all dependent on how you've established yourself within that show, because subs do get cut and music directors do definitely have people who are like, emergency only, I don't like this person, they're not getting better, I've given notes, it's not happening. So that we don't want to, like, you know, ignore that factor. It's not like everybody plays, everybody's great, whatever. Some subs struggle. Some subs get very defensive when noted. Some regulars get defensive when noted, but that's like a more complicated what you can do about that. But for subs, you know, who are struggling or not agreeing with some of the notes. So, I mean, Meg can speak more to that. It's not like a 100% pass rate, but if you build up the goodwill within the context of that show, plus just generally speaking, you know, like reputationally, and also just showing that you want to and are making the effort to improve, usually you'll be afforded opportunities to be able to show that.
Right, and we are running out of time, but Antoine, if I could ask you though, like, from your personal experience, how do you manage being in a situation where you feel like I've made a mistake and I feel, you know, psychologically, like, how do you harp on it? Do you feel like, oh, you know what, I've done this 100 times in a row really well, I'm afforded 101st time that didn't go great? You know what I mean? Like, how does that?
I mean, I think mostly the latter, but what I will say is that a lot of the shows that I have played of late, you know, let's say I'm the first chair, so I'm the one who was the solos and what have you. You do maybe have a little extra focus to make sure you're coming in correctly at those moments, concentrated, because that you want to play your best in the most exposed moments. But in general, you have to just move on, you know. I mean, at least that's how I view it. Just like what Phil was saying.
Yeah. We are unbelievably, this time has flown by. I can't believe it's been 90 minutes. I could talk to you guys about this stuff for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Drinks later.
If there's any questions, I'm not seeing questions in the chat. If there are any, this would be a great time to ask. Well, I don't see any in the thing though, so I'm gonna assume there aren't any. Okay, so we're good. So I just want to, John Kangla, thank you so much. Antoine Silverman, thank you so much. Emily Browsa, Meg Zagulis, Philip Hayden, thank you guys so much. It's great.
Thank you, Simon.
You know, it's thank you so much for joining us on this thing and sharing your expertise. And you guys are all, you know, such amazing colleagues and musicians. So thanks for joining me on this. And yeah, really appreciate you guys. And for people watching, I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Pleasure.
Thank you.